This morning, Sunday Science is in the kitchen as we learn how to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie. Sounds like you had a tough assignment, Kat.
Can you believe it, Julie? I had to make and eat 3 batches of cookies. That's definitely some tough work there. And as you might imagine, everyone has their own idea of what makes the best cookie. And as I found out, any of it comes down to chemistry. The chocolate chip cookie, the perfect comfort food. They come in different shapes, sizes, and flavors. So, what's behind this culinary classic? Let's dip into the science, stirring up 3 batches, thin, puffed, and in between.
So talk to me a little bit about why a cake flour versus an all-purpose flour would be different for making cookies.
Sure. So cake flour is lower protein than all-purpose flour, and so it tends to absorb less water. And so more water is available to turn into steam in the oven, and that gives the cookie a lift. So you're going to end up with puffier cookies. And if you make with all-purpose flour or with bread flour, they're going to spread out more because there isn't that puff.
And if you're like me and you've always wondered what the difference is between baking soda and baking powder, food scientist Jake Lawn has the answer. He says baking soda is a base and needs to react with an added acid to generate the gases that cause cookies to rise.
There isn't that much that's acidic in cookies in the first place. So if you add just plain baking soda, you're not going to get much carbon dioxide generated, so you're not going to get a lot of lift with baking soda.
Baking powder, on the other hand, has both the acid and the base in it, meaning it only needs a liquid to react, and thus creates puffier cookies. But the two are not directly interchangeable. Too much baking soda can cause a soapy flavor.
You can't just sub them in. You would want to adjust the recipe a little bit.
Next, the sugars. Lawn tells me regular granulated sugar does not brown as fast because of its chemical makeup. It also makes for harder cookies.
When there's not a lot of moisture in a recipe, like in cookies, it tends to recrystallize when it cools down, and so it gives a snappy texture to the cookies.
Brown sugar, on the other hand, has molasses and more complex sugars.
Not only does it add a little bit of flavor from all those slightly more complex ingredients, that nice kind of brown sugar flavor, but it tends to soften as it cools because it picks up water from the environment, and so will make a less snappy cookie.
Plain corn syrup often gets a bad rap, but in cookies it can be used to change texture and color.
I know I myself like using the fewest number of ingredients possible, but if you do a mix, even just a little bit of corn syrup added to a cookie made with mostly white sugar will produce both browning results and a little bit more chewiness.
We got to our liquid stage here, and I noticed the thin batch had me actually use milk instead of eggs. Talk a little bit about why that kind of flattens out your cookie.
Sure. So eggs provide both liquid and protein, and egg protein set at a reasonably low temperature. And so when you add eggs to a cookie, before it can spread fully and make a thin cookie like this, instead those proteins are going to set up and help it stay both more compact and also more risen. Milk, on the other hand, the proteins in milk don't act in the same way.
And last, we've got our butter versus shortening. And if you're someone like me, using shortening is kind of like, why would you do that? But you said it actually does affect the texture of the cookies.
It does.
The reason it does, he says, is because of the different fat contents. Shortening is nearly 100% fat, whereas butter is about 81 to 86% fat and has some water. That extra water causes more of a spread in the cookie. Butter also has a lower melting point, so it spreads out in the oven faster than shortening does.
A way to get around that, though, and still use butter, you said, would be to chill the dough or freeze the dough.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's an easy way to do it and also makes it easier to form. Again, that's just about manipulating the melting point because the cookie itself is going to absorb more heat before that butter is going to get to the melting point.
Learning the science of baking to create your perfect cookie. Are you guys hungry yet?
Oh, I can just smell these cookies right here.
And before we get to the taste test, so I do have a couple more tips. He says that the thickness and color of the baking tray that you use also makes a difference. Lighter colored or thinner trays reflect more heat into the baked goods, so they'll actually cook faster. And we'll have that recipe and some recommended books if you want to learn a bit more on a website a little later this morning. And now we can get to our taste test. So you have 3 different cookies in front of you, one from each of those batches. And I think you can probably guess which one is which. So I would like you to do a taste test and tell me Courtney, which one is your favorite?
Let me just say, when I watched the story, you go ahead and start tasting.
Okay.
You're going to do some weather in a minute.
When I watched it, the corn syrup thing, because corn syrup's not something they typically call for in a chocolate chip cookie recipe.
Right.
But if you like it chewy, like I do,
Or brown.
then that would be.
Yeah,
Which one
just a
did you
little
try?
I started with the thin one, which is I tend to like the thinner cookie, so that was
That's
really
gonna
good.
be mine. Ooh,
I will go to number 2 now.
number 2 looks good.
Yeah, that's going to be
This
your
is
thick
one
and
that you
puffy
can
cookie.
almost just, as you break it, you feel like it'll please everyone.
I thought that the chilling the dough thing was a really good tip because I don't really like to use shortening in cookies, but I do like them a little thicker. So I think I will be trying that in my baking at home. That way you can still use butter, which to me is a little more natural, but you can also then still get that nice thick cookie you want.
I think I like 3. I like the little bit
I have this
puffier.
last one to try.
So you like the shortening one?
So is that what that's what does that, huh? Shortening. Well, now I know.
And I like 1.
But I'm such a I'm like you. I feel like butter's better, but I guess for the kind
Maybe
of
you should
cookie,
try
it just
chilling the
depends.
dough then, just like that.
It's amazing how different these all are, though. So there's definitely something for everyone here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I still have to say, like, the thin, crisp. But, you know, we all have our
Different
favorites.
That's why
things.
now you know how to make the cookie that you want.
And I still
Yes.
think that corn syrup tip is so cool. I never had any idea with that.
Me too. And I still think you may have the coolest job at Channel 3.
I think maybe our viewers are a little jealous of our cookies. Sorry we can't hand them through the TV
Right?
to you.
Smell-o-vision, or at
She
least.
makes cookies for science.
Yes,
she
she
jumps
does.
out of airplanes for destination. It's just all around good times over here.